a question, but I think I just missed it. Oh, here we go. Javi's asking, do you believe in the historical Jesus? That's a good question.
Yeah, I was thinking about writing a book about this because I get the question a lot, and I unfortunately get quoted as someone who thinks that Jesus didn't exist, which I think is really very strange because I've written an entire book on what Jesus said and did.
Okay.
and for him to say and do anything, he had to exist. So I don't think there's any serious historian who doubts the existence of Jesus. There are a lot of people who want to write sensational books and make a lot of money who say Jesus didn't exist, but I don't know any serious scholar who doubts the existence of Jesus. And so absolutely.
Or shall we say a Jesus?
Well, I mean...
Because there's some ideas about this too, right? Like, Jesus Christ itself, right, just means, what does it mean, like the anointed one or something?
Well, Christ is the Greek word for anointed one. It's the same, it's the Greek equivalent of the word Mashiach in Hebrew, which
Messiah.
is where we get Messiah from.
Right. So basically, so any, Jewish sect that believed that they had that Jesus Christ, then that entity would exist, so to speak. So I mean, I guess what I'm saying here, I guess I'm going with maybe the multiple Jesus hypothesis, that there might have been a variety of different, which is why we have so many different stories.
I don't think there was more than one person. I mean, I think
really?
there was a historical person, Jesus, and that we can say some things historically about him. But what happened was, after his death, so many people told stories in so many different parts of the Roman Empire that different portraits of Jesus emerged. And some of these portraits show up in the Gospels, so that, in fact, the portrait of Jesus in Luke's Gospel is different from the portrait of Mark, and different from the one in John, and different from the one in the Gospel of Peter, or the Gospel of Judas. I mean, these are all different portraits.
Well, it sounds like, to me, there are people in the chat room right now disagreeing, of course, but they're saying that there really isn't any hardcore evidence, though, there isn't any evidence, really, that Jesus did exist, except what people are saying about him. But
I disagree with that.
Really?
What hardcore evidence is there that Julius Caesar existed?
Well, this is the same kind of argument apologists use, by the way, for the existence of Jesus, by the way.
What's that?
They like to say the same thing you just said just then about, well, what kind of evidence we have for Judas?
Well, I mean, it's just a typical, it's a historical point.
Right.
I mean, how do you establish the historical existence?
Right. Well, I guess
from the past?
I guess it depends on the claims. It depends on the claims that people have made during that particular time about a particular person and their influence on society.
I mean, there are. One has to look at historical evidence. And if you say that historical evidence doesn't count, then I think you get into huge trouble, because then then why not just deny the Holocaust? Or, why not deny that Abraham Lincoln lived? Or why not deny, I think these things, I think it matters what happened in history.
Right. Well, what I like to say is, the way I like to word it this way, because, really, I think we do have more evidence for those things you mentioned than we probably do Jesus Christ. But I like to tell people, well, what harm would it do? Because especially the information that you have just now about even if there was a Jesus, the book of Mark shows us that there was an embellishment way after anyway.
Well, but there are people who want to know what Jesus really did say.
Right.
And that assumes that he really existed.
And that we can't know.
You have to look at the evidence.
What is the evidence? Because even that we cannot know for sure. But I guess you would say we can look at the earliest manuscripts that date to around when he should have existed or something, or what? What do we have? Because we don't have anything that exists until after he died, allegedly, right?
About him, you mean?
Right, about Jesus.
Well, that's true of everyone.
Well, not really. Aren't there some? I thought there was some. Well, I guess so. But I thought that there are some contemporary that there are some writers who'd write about people as they existed, like with Julius Caesar, weren't there?
But we don't have. We don't have anybody from that time talking to us now. All we have are ancient records.
Right, but again,
all we have for Jesus are ancient records.
But we don't have any ancient records of anyone who wrote about Jesus while he was alive, do we?
No, absolutely not. And
we don't that's the difference.
Just as we don't have for billions of people who lived in the past that we're pretty sure existed. We have more evidence for Jesus than we have for almost anybody from his time period. So, I'm not saying this as a believer. I'm not a believer, but as a historian, I'm just saying that you can't just kind of dismiss it and say, well, we don't know. You have to look at the evidence. So there is hard evidence, I think.
Okay. I would look for archaeological evidence as well.
For example, we have one author who actually knew Jesus' relatives and knew his disciples.
And who was that?
Paul.
How do we know that?
Because we have Paul's letters.
How do we know he didn't lie about it?
Why would he lie about it?
Well, there.
See, the point.
But there are people. There are people. But
Paul says things about Jesus as off-the-cuff comments, where he's not making a point. And see, that's very important to historians. In other words, a historian wants to find disinterested comments.
Right.
And Paul has disinterested comments where he says things, for example, about James, the brother of the Lord, which is just an off-the-cuff comment because everybody that he's writing to knows who he's talking about. So he just makes the off-the-cuff comment. That's very important information.
And that is, and that is if he wrote them.
Disciples. Now,
if he even wrote that
comment about the 12 disciples, if in fact, so the whole point is that you've got a disinterested comment from somebody who actually knew these people.
If he even wrote that, though, correct? Because isn't there some?
No, there's no doubt about Paul writing Galatians.
Aren't there some theories that suggest that maybe Paul himself had scribes that wrote for him?
Well, every person who wrote epistles in the ancient world dictated them to scribes.
Right. So how do we know then that?
Well, how do you know Cicero wrote his letters?
I don't. I'm not a historian, so I don't know much about Cicero. But
no, I am a historian. I'm telling you.
But there are some. but there are many historians who disagree with you, aren't they?
No, none that I've ever heard of.
Oh, really?
Well, not serious historians.
Not serious historians.
Listen, I know thousands of scholars of the ancient world, and I don't know any one of these scholars who doubts that Paul wrote Galatians.
Okay.
So these are people who've devoted their lives to this, and a lot of them are like me. It's not that I've got a personal investment in Paul. I mean, I'm not even a Christian.
Right.
I'm just saying, as a historian, there's no doubt Paul wrote Galatians.